Many people are making a serious mistake when getting rid of their old phones. Chrome is about to put user tracking into the express lane. A government not only unlocked a journalist's phone with Cellebrite, but also planted malware on it, and much, much more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 207, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past 2 weeks. I am Nathan from The New Oil.
And I'm Henry from Techlore.
I like your background.
Thank you.
All right, and our sponsor this week is Easy Opt-outs. You know, we're heading into a new year, and that means there's a lot of people are setting, what do they call those, New Year's resolutions. You're setting new goals for the year, and one of them should be to, in my opinion, you know, there's many great goals you could set, but maybe you're looking for a way to take your privacy to the next level. If you haven't done any data removal yet, this is definitely an option. You could do it manually, but that is a lot of work, and Easy Opt-outs is very affordable. They're a data removal service. They only charge $20 a year. There is research from Consumer Reports that says they are very effective. The most effective way is doing it yourself. The second most effective is Optory, who is $200 a year, or the third most effective is Easy Opt-outs, and they're all pretty close to each other, so, you know, in our opinion, it's a pretty good bang for your buck. They don't submit any removal requests unless they actually find your data on a website, so that way they're not sending your data to companies that don't have it. They're always trying to add new sites where your data might be found. They focus all of their resources on keeping things affordable. You know, they're not doing a bunch of crazy marketing or anything. That's how they can keep these prices low. They don't share your data with third-party contractors or anything. There's just two founders. They're based here in the US. They don't use any ads, any analytics. Cancellation is easy. If you're unhappy with the service, you can get a refund, and they even offer plans for businesses. So again, if you have not tackled the data removal thing, this is a great time to start. And again, you can do it yourself. We're not at all opposed to that. It's just that is a lot of work. And, you know, this seems like a very trustworthy company, can provide receipts that they do what they say they do at a very affordable price. So thank you to Easy Opt-outs for supporting us, and be sure to check them out if you are looking for that. And with that, our highlight story this week. So this was some research that came across my newsfeed, and I was really shocked by this. The headline says 1/3 of adults can't delete device data. So this came from the Register, and they're talking about clearing personal data off of an old device, like a phone. Like, so, you know, Christmas just came and went. A lot of people got new phones, and that means you have old phones that hopefully didn't explode on you like mine did. So, you know, theoretically, you have to clear the data off that phone before you resell it or, you know, trade it in or whatever. And apparently a lot of people aren't doing that. So they said 3 in 10 people, or 29% of adults, don't know how to remove the information, according to a survey of 2,170 members of the UK public. They said 71% of the people they interviewed agreed that wiping a device was important, but almost 24% reckoned it was too arduous. This means that the drawer of dusty devices is set to swell. 3/4 of respondents reported hanging on to at least one old device, and a fifth did so because they were worried about their personal information. More than 1 in 5, or 21% of young people in the survey, didn't think it was important to wipe personal data, while 23% said they didn't care what might happen to that data. Just 14% of people aged 18 to 34 said they wouldn't bother wiping their devices at all, compared to just 4% of people over 55. On the plus side, a majority, 84%, said that they would ensure data was erased before disposing of a device. Not to be a cynic, this is a self-reported survey. How many people say that but don't mean it? So yeah, this is troubling. I mean, I guess it's one thing if you're going to hold on to the device for a while. I'm really guilty of that. Like, I'll get a new anything really, and I'll hold on to the box for a while in case there's any kind of, like, you know, defect with it or I need to return it, and then I forget that the box is there and I never throw it out. And, you know, I could see if you're holding on to, like, again, let's say you got a new phone for Christmas, you're like, well, let me hold on to the old one in case this one has a problem or I forgot to transfer something. But it's still really unsettling that so many people either just don't see the value or just don't care, especially if we're talking about a device that they're going to trade in. Not to, like, attack people, but, you know, we always run into those people who are just like, oh, I don't trust Signal. You know, you should. I actually ran into a person this week. I think we forget a lot of the time that we come up with these really obscure solutions, you know, like, not to shill it too much, but our sponsor this week, like, everybody, oh, you need to go remove your own personal data. People don't even know how to wipe their damn iPhones. And you're telling them they got to go manually remove their own data. They got to self-host their own XMPP servers. They got to manually manage backing up and syncing their KeyPass vaults. Like, there is so much work to be done. And I am a huge advocate of, like, we need to raise the tech literacy level of people to get to the point where some of those more extreme suggestions aren't quite so extreme. Some of them. But at the same time, like, there's clearly so much work to do, and we have to meet people where they are. I think it's really elitist, and honestly, like, not to go off on a tangent. Well, I already did. But, privacy is a human right. And the minute we start gatekeeping and say, like, well, if you don't know how to self-host, you don't deserve privacy, that's kind of fucked up. I'm just going to put it plainly. Like, that's like saying, well, if you don't know how to farm wheat, you don't deserve to eat.
Yeah, I think it's a progression. I think it's really good to meet people where they're at and hopefully gets them invested. I think that's why tools like Signal are so powerful. And then for people who want more and think it's not good enough for them because they're now using at least something better than they used to, they can move on past there. But I think trying to get people to move to these more advanced techniques right away, I think it doesn't really help anybody. I think it just might turn people away, if anything, and just discourage them when they can't succeed right away. In terms of actually wiping devices, I do see a lot of questions out there on how to do it. At least on mobile phones, which I think is probably the more common thing people are selling, there is like an encryption key tied to each user, essentially, at least on Android devices. And so pretty much like all you have to do is just factory reset your phone. There's an encryption key, gets wiped, and you can assure that your data is deleted. You don't have to go in and delete it manually. There's no like process outside of just factory reset your phone, and you should be fine. Same thing on the iOS side of things.
I think most devices are like that nowadays too. Like I think Windows has a factory reset option, and you can choose if you want to keep the data or erase it. I'm willing to bet Macs had that for years, probably.
Yeah. And if you're somebody who uses full disk encryption already on those operating systems, you've had even less to worry about. But yeah, I've seen some iffy things about the wiping methods on the desktop a bit. But yeah, for most people, if you just click the erase all my data securely option, if that's something that you can see, then you're probably fine. So yeah, just keep that in mind when you're selling stuff. And I'm someone who's actually, in the used market a lot when I buy new devices. So this is something I kind of look out for. First thing I do, also, I think the advice goes the other way. When you buy a new device, even if they factory reset it, I would still factory reset it on my end as well, just to be double sure that they did everything properly. All right, we're gonna go into data breaches, and we have a lot of data breaches this week. We actually have news from the last 2 weeks, and so we are gonna do our best to work through it to keep this podcast a somewhat reasonable time. So we're going to go through the first few, and then we're just going to give you headlines beyond that. So we're just going to cover the biggest ones, and we're going to start with Ascension, which leaked the health data of 5.6 million in a ransomware attack. So for those who don't know, this is one of the largest private U.S. healthcare systems, and these 5.6 million people are patients and employees, and their personal and health data was stolen in this May cyber attack. Keep in mind, I always like to pay attention to the dates on these. This was from May, and now we're hearing about it. Since the breach, the investigation has revealed that some of the stolen files contain patients and employees' names and information across one or more of the following categories: medical info, medical record numbers, dates of service, types of tests, procedure codes, payment information, which includes credit card or bank account numbers, insurance, Medicare IDs, policy numbers, insurance claims, government ID information, social security numbers, tax numbers, driver's license numbers. Honestly, probably anything on these people. There's more, like passports and birth addresses, just everything. I can't actually think of anything else. I guess they didn't get sexual preferences, which sometimes we'll see in these data breaches. It's like, oh, calculator app leaks sexual preferences, and we go, what? Anyway. The company now mails data breach notifications to affected individuals starting Thursday, December 19th. They also are offering affected people 24 free months of IDX identity theft protection services.
Our next one is also very health related. Texas Tech University system breached 1.4 million patient records. So the Texas Tech University Health Center and the El Paso counterpart, I don't know where the main one is, but yeah, so 2 different campuses. The organization is a public academic health institution which educates and trains healthcare professionals and conducts medical research and provides patient care services. The following information may have been exposed and varies from person to person: full name, date of birth, physical address, social security number, driver's license number, government ID number, financial account information, health insurance information, medical information, billing and claims data, diagnosis and treatment information. So almost as bad as the Ascension one. Those who are confirmed to have been impacted will be notified by the organization and will be offered free credit monitoring services. And once again, we're sarcastically so jealous. So yeah, I mean, this is very similar to the Ascension one. I don't have anything to add that Henry didn't already say. Freeze your credit, I guess.
And a third data breach, Connect on Call breach, exposes health data of over 900,000 patients. This is a telehealth platform and after-hours on-call answering service with automated patient call tracking for healthcare providers. The personal information exposed during the almost 3-month-long breach includes information shared in communications between patients and their healthcare providers, like names and phone numbers. This may also have included medical record numbers, dates of birth, as well as information related to health conditions, treatments, prescriptions, and in a small number of cases, social security numbers. Definitely alarming. This is another medical breach, which is always unfortunate.
And since it was 2 weeks, we had a whole bunch of data breaches. We're going to try to get through these as quick as we can to save you guys some time, so this isn't like a 2-hour podcast. The first one comes from Rhode Island, who says that data was likely breached in a social services cyber attack. They said hundreds of thousands of residents could be affected, and this affected their programs that impact things like Medicaid and SNAP, as well as Health Source RI, which is their health insurance marketplace. Pretty much any individual who has received or applied for health coverage and or health and human services programs or benefits could be impacted. Names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, and banking information.
Tracker firm Happen is spilling names of thousands of GPS tracking customers. They used to be known as SpyTech, and this is actually a tracking company that allows users to remotely monitor real-time locations of internet-enabled tracking devices. They were caught in a breach, so if you know someone who uses these or you use them yourself, make sure to check out the sources for more information.
We have a couple from India. First is McDonald's. There was a bug in their delivery system that exposed customer data. It allowed anyone to access, hijack, redirect, or real-time track orders or make legitimate orders for just 1 cent by interacting with the company's API. It also allowed access to invoices and provided the ability to submit feedback for orders. It exposed full names, email addresses, and phone numbers of customers and vehicle numbers, profile pictures, and real-time location of delivery drivers. This has since been fixed. And then India has an app called Rapido, which there was a website form meant to collect feedback. I guess this is like a rickshaw kind of thing. I guess kind of like Uber, maybe? I don't know. But either way, the form exposed full names, email addresses, and phone numbers of individuals. As of the Thursday that this article was published, there were over 1,800 responses which were exposed. And TechCrunch says that after they contacted Rapido, the data portal was set to private. So hopefully that will be fixed, if it has not been already.
European Space Agency's official store was hacked to steal payment cards. So this is their official agency store. If you shop from them, definitely check this out down in the description. And of course, the Clop ransomware is now extorting 66 Clio data theft victims. They're contacting those companies directly to provide links to a secure channel to conduct ransomware payment.
All right, that'll take us into companies, and we're going to start with some news from Google. First up, the headline says, forget Chrome, Google starts tracking all your devices in 8 weeks. I just want to give a quick little opinion here because I hate the way this article was written. These articles do seem legit. The problem I have with them is they're written in a very prose-like storytelling way, or not storytelling. They're written in a very prose-like opinion piece kind of way, where they don't actually say what they're talking about. They just sort of start talking about it. So I don't know exactly what the hell this author is saying, but from what I can tell, it seems that Google is going to basically start expanding fingerprinting, which, selfless plug, I put out a video recently about fingerprinting. I think it was pretty good. It's done pretty well. So check that out if you don't know what fingerprinting is and want more information over on the New Oils channel. But basically, I guess this is something they haven't really been doing before, specifically on smart devices. That's from the sound of this. They've obviously been doing it on the internet, probably your phone as well, or maybe Google just hasn't been doing it directly and now they're going to get in the game. So this is really problematic because most devices have, at very least, some minor control over privacy settings, especially on smart devices. Like usually you can toggle a button that says like, I don't want to see targeted ads, or like, I want to reject third-party cookies. And it doesn't really do much, but it's something. The problem is fingerprinting is so complex and nebulous and relatively unknown to a lot of people that there's really no control over that. And apparently Google is going to start doing this, again, maybe in general, but especially on smart devices, TVs, I don't know, what else would Google have? Any kind of smart device they can get their hands on, which is probably a lot of them. And they're going to start using that for targeted ads. Shocker, shocker. Because, this is supposedly better and more privacy respecting than third-party cookies. Whatever. And again, it's just going to make cross-device tracking even easier. Yeah, again, that's really hard to defend against. So I don't know that I really have a lot of advice there other than try to use content blockers on your router if you are tech savvy enough. A VPN can help a little bit because the big ones like Proton and Mullvad and IVPN, they do have content blockers you can enable. change your DNS. That'll help stop some stuff. I mean, there's some stuff you can do, but yeah, it's going to be really hard to like meaningfully defend against this. And then I'll just go ahead and take the next story since they're both Google. Google Chrome is using AI to analyze pages in new scam detection features. So this is a new flag in Chrome Canary, which is kind of like their nightly or their beta build. And the feature is called client-side detection brand and intent for scam detection, which is super catchy. And apparently it uses an LLM, kind of like ChatGPT, to analyze web pages on your device. This feature is believed to help the scam detection service detect the brand and purpose or intent of a web page, making it easier to identify potential scams. It works on Mac, Windows, and Linux, and it is unclear how the feature works, but it could issue warnings when you visit an obvious scam website. So again, it's what they mean by they're unclear how it works. They're not sure if like you visit a scam website and it'll just have a little pop-up or if it'll try to block it entirely. We're not really sure. Israeli spy maker Paragon has been bought by a US private equity giant. Paragon was the company that created a spyware product called Graphite, which I think flew under my radar. I've heard of Pegasus. I've heard of Predator was like the other big one, right? I think. But I've not heard of this one. But anyways, yeah, they were acquired last week, maybe 2 weeks ago when this article was written, by American private equity giant AE Industrial Partners, according to news reports. Allegedly, the deal was for about $500 million. The article, this is TechCrunch, so they have a whole breakdown of how that deal works because, you know, they're very entrepreneur focused. Forbes reported that in 2021, Paragon was offering services to hack phones that allowed access to apps on a target's phone, like WhatsApp, Signal, Messenger, and Gmail. Just to reiterate for the people in the back, that does not mean Signal is cracked. If somebody has access to the phone where the messages are decrypted, that is not a vulnerability. And that's what they're talking about here. Graphite has been likened as a competitor of Pegasus, which is made by NSO. And in October, Wired reported that the U.S. Customs and Enforcement had signed a one-year contract worth $2 million with Paragon to acquire a, quote, fully configured proprietary solution, which included licenses, hardware, warranties, maintenance, and training. And then the article goes on to describe a couple other such contracts that were uncovered regarding this particular group, just to kind of show you how super popular these things are with governments and law enforcement, which is so awesome. So, yeah, again, I don't really think there's anything actionable there, just kind of something to be aware of in this ever-evolving landscape.
And this one's really quick. AdGuard's a company probably best known in our communities for their like ad blocker tracker protector in Safari, but they also have a DNS service as well. And now they are releasing something else, which is called AdGuard Mail, which is a new AdGuard product to protect your email. If you're curious what that means, no, it is not a Proton alternative. It's like a simple login ADI.io alternative. So it's temp mail. It's a unique feature, currently free. So if anyone's interested in that, give it a shot. I haven't used it, so I can't say if it's better than Simple Login or ADI.io, but I think more services like this are pretty cool.
All right, that'll take us into research. Our first one says, attackers can jailbreak digital license plates to make others pay their tolls and tickets. The veterans in the crowd are not shocked because we all know that if it's digital, it can be hacked. Anyways, digital license plates, for those who don't know, are already legal to buy in a growing number of states and drive with, and they offer a few perks over their sheet metal predecessors. For example, you can change the display on the fly to frame your license plate number with a novelty message, or you can actually do something useful like flag that your car has been stolen. But one researcher has shown that they can also be hacked to, for example, change the license plate number to avoid tickets or tolls. And you can even change them to an existing number so that someone else gets stuck with that toll. So a researcher revealed the technique on plates sold by a company called Reviver, who is the leading vendor. They have sold about 65,000 plates in the US already. They say you can remove a sticker on the back of the plate, attach a cable to the internal connector, and you can rewrite it in a matter of minutes. There's basically they install a custom firmware, and then you can now use an app on your smartphone to connect via Bluetooth and instantly change your display to show whatever you want, which means somebody needs to start running Doom on this thing, because that's always how it goes. So unfortunately, because this vulnerability exists on the hardware level, that means that there's no way for Reviver to issue a patch. Instead, they would have to replace those chips, which they are almost certainly not going to do. Hopefully, they will fix this going forward so that future plates are not affected. The researcher said they tried to contact Reviver several times. They even alerted the US CERT, which is like the Computer Emergency Response Team or something. Reviver told Wired that they only became aware of the research when Wired reached out to them. It's also worth noting that this researcher was not the first one to hack these systems. In 2022, another researcher found vulnerabilities in the web infrastructure that allowed him to make an administrator in its backend database and then could track or change license plates at will. Unlike this most recent hardware hack, however, Reviver was quick to patch the web bug. Digital license plates are currently legal to buy and register in California and Arizona. Michigan briefly allowed them. Many more states are considering legalizing them in the years to come. As the rollout continues, researchers argue that license plate makers, transit regulators, and law enforcement all need to be aware that any system that relies solely on license plates as an identifier may be susceptible to digital license plate hacking with potentially chaotic consequences, which I think is fair. I guess the good news here is, this is one of those things that requires physical access. It doesn't sound that hard. I mean, the researcher didn't go into detail. He also said he's not going to publish the code because obviously that can be really bad in this case. I would say probably hold off on digital license plates for a while. Just know that that's a thing.
All right, so the last research article is really interesting. It's titled Big Brother, The Effects of Surveillance on Fundamental Aspects of Social Vision. And I'm just going to quote kind of the bio of this here. Despite the dramatic rise of surveillance in our societies, only limited research has examined its effects on humans. While most research has focused on voluntary behavior, no study has examined the effects of surveillance on more fundamental and automatic aspects of human perceptual awareness and cognition. Here we show that being watched on CCTV markedly impacts a hardwired and involuntary function of human sensory perception, the ability to consciously detect faces. These findings show that being watched impacts not only consciously controlled behaviors, but also unconscious. Their results have implications concerning the impacts of surveillance on basic human cognition, as well as public mental health. And there is a full-on 8-page research paper available in the notes if you want to read more. Not something I've seen talked about very much, and something that is actually really cool. And it's something I'll think about a little bit more, because I definitely know that there's probably a very interesting relationship between like mental health and I guess privacy concerns. And I think this is kind of like the beginning of us starting to see research digging into the question, which is pretty exciting. Not the concerns, but the research.
With that, we're going to jump into politics, and I apologize if we blow through these, but we have a lot of stories this week. Everybody was really burning the midnight oil right before the Christmas break. So here's what we got. Our first story comes from Wales, and it says, new app lets police identify suspects in the street. So this app is known as Operator Initiated Facial Recognition, or OIFR, and it has already been tested by 70 officers across South Wales and will be used by the police and Gwent police. Police are, of course, defending this software. They're saying they could use it on unconscious people to identify them promptly so they can, get them the care they need, or deceased people so they can notify the families as soon as possible. They say if someone is wanted for a criminal offense, they could ensure their quick arrest and detention. Police say that cases of mistaken identity would be easily resolved without the need to visit a police station or custody. Police said photos taken using the app would not be retained, and those taken in private places such as houses, schools, and medical facilities and places of worship would only be used in situations relating to a risk of significant harm. Big Brother Watch, which is one of the nonprofits that I recommend you support if you are interested, they said that in Britain, none of us has to identify ourselves to police without very good reason, but this unregulated surveillance tech threatens to take that fundamental right away. There's another civil liberties group called Liberty, and they said the technology was a, quote, deeply invasive breach of our privacy rights, data protection laws, and equality laws. We urgently need the government to introduce safeguards to protect us as we go about our daily lives, rather than allowing the police to continue to experiment at the expense of our civil liberties, unquote.
Serbian police have used Cellebrite to unlock and then plant spyware on a journalist's phone. So this was an activist that had their phones hacked by local authorities using a cell phone unlocking device, which is Cellebrite. We've talked about this many times on the podcast. The authorities' goal was not just to unlock the phones, though. They also wanted to install spyware to enable further surveillance. So they said in its report that it believes that these are the first forensically documented spyware infections enabled by the use of Cellebrite tools. So using Cellebrite in combination with actual spyware is essentially the new concern here. Amnesty and digital rights group Citizen Lab have documented dozens of these cases where governments used advanced spyware made by Western Pioneer Hacking Team, among others, to remotely hack dissidents, journalists, and political opponents. Now, as 0 days and remotely planted spyware become more expensive thanks to security improvements, authorities may have to rely more on less sophisticated methods, such as getting their hands physically on the phones they want to hack. I'm really curious how this journalist didn't have their phone. Maybe they left it in their room, and that's how they were able to pull it off. But just kind of this is very, very extreme advice that not many people have to really pay attention to unless they're someone who is targeted like these individuals. But, if your device isn't near you, it's nice to have a way to at least know if it's been tampered with. I know that's something that people can implement a lot of different tips to try to make that happen. So Just something to think about.
French piracy blocking order goes global. DNS service Quad9 vows to fight. So in May, the Paris Judicial Court ordered Google, Cloudflare, and Cisco to block access to several pirate websites by poisoning their DNS. Quick recap for anybody who may not know. DNS is, a lot of people call it the phone book of the internet. The actual president of Quad9, John Todd, he described it as a map of the internet. It tells you how to get to the website you're trying to find. So if somebody removes a website from their DNS record and you're using that particular resolver, you will not be able to find the website. The order compelled the tech giants to prevent users from accessing unauthorized streams of Champions League and Premier League matches. So they said the applicant Canal Plus argued that alternative DNS resolvers allowed people to bypass the regular blocking measures implemented by internet providers. In their view, DNS blocking is proportionate and necessary to prevent piracy. Canal Plus did not stop at this initial order. As reported last month, several follow-up orders were issued to target yet more domains, gradually expanding the scope. While that was ongoing, new proceedings against other DNS resolvers were launched as well, and in a series of new orders provided last week, which you can see in the article, Canal Plus added Quad9 and Verkara to the list of targeted resolvers. In response to the legal pressure, Cisco decided to discontinue its OpenDNS server in France altogether. Quad9 does not want to go that far, but its implementation has broad consequences, as the targeted domain names will be blocked for all customers. Quad9 says its system is designed to treat every user in every country the same way. For privacy reasons, Quad9 also has no precise information about the location of its users. This is in line with European and Swiss privacy laws, and therefore, to remain in compliance, the blocking measures must be global. For those who are interested, I think it's on the old Techlore channel, back when Surveillance Report used to be on there. We actually did an interview with John Todd from Quad9. He explained DNS very, very well. So if you want to know more, check that out. He also explained, and the article mentioned this, they were in a very similar battle with Sony, I think over this exact same thing. And Sony was trying to tell them that they had to block piracy sites who were pirating Sony music. And Quad9 fought them, and the article mentions they actually won. So good news there. Update, Quad9 won that legal case. But now they have to do it all over again with the country of France. So just rounding it out, the last paragraph, this legal battle certainly isn't over yet. Quad9 is determined to fight against DNS censorship, and since it's a nonprofit organization, it requests help from the public to fund this quest. So you can go check the article. That sentence is a link there where you can donate to them. You could go straight to their website and donate to them.
Meta is going to set up a $50 million privacy payment scheme to settle Australian proceeding. So this concerns the 2018 Cambridge Analytica scandal, when data on millions of Facebook users was exfiltrated without their knowledge or consent by a developer on its platform. The OAIC sued Facebook in 2020, pursuing damages for the 300,000 plus local users believed to have been caught up in this. And under the settlement, the company has agreed to establish a payment program for Facebook users who may have suffered loss or damage as a result of interferences with their privacy. So pretty cool stuff, actually. If that wasn't enough for you, Meta was also fined over $260 million for another 2018 security breach that affected 3 million EU Facebook users. This is from the Ireland's Data Protection Commission, who I feel like has fined Meta once a month for the last 2 years. And yeah, of all of those incidents, this is not one of the largest ones, but it's still there. So this dates back to 2017 when Facebook rolled out a video upload function that included a view as feature, which let the user see their own Facebook page as it would be seen by another user. A bug in a design allowed malicious actors to invoke the uploader in conjunction with Facebook's Happy Birthday Composer feature to generate a user token that can give them full access to the Facebook profile of that user. This could then use the token to exploit the same combination of features on other accounts, gaining unauthorized access to multiple users' profile and data. So the watchdog actually said, sometimes we hear about these exploits, but we never actually see them used in the wild. Not in this situation, because they think this was used to log into 29 million Facebook accounts globally, which is around 3 million of them located in the EU. And personal data impacted by the breach included Facebook users' full names, emails, phone numbers, location, place of work, date of birth, religion, gender, posts on timelines, groups in which they were a member, and children's personal data. So they're finally being held accountable for that. And yes, the stuff moves slow, but it's still nice to happen.
Next up, Shine, I don't know how that's pronounced. I don't really care. They must cede Indians' data and control of local ops to re-enter India. So in a parliamentary disclosure on Tuesday, when this article was published, India's commerce minister said that Shine will operate purely as a technology partner, with Reliance maintaining complete ownership and control of the platform through its wholly owned subsidiary, Reliance Retail Ventures Limited. The platform will be subject to security audits by government-impaneled cybersecurity auditors, a level of oversight not typically required for retail partnerships. The technology agreement between Reliance Retail and Singapore-based Shein requires the e-commerce platform to be hosted on infrastructure in India. All platform data, including personal and non-personal information collected from Indian customers, must remain in India, and Shein would have no access to or rights over such data.
5 years later, Netflix has been hit with a Dutch data access fine. So this is about $5 million or a little bit less in euros. And Netflix, meanwhile, raked in around 33.7 billion in annual revenue in 2023 alone. The reason that stat is included is to kind of shed light on how ridiculous that fine is. Either way, they did get that fine successfully taken care of, and they concluded that the streaming giant failed to adequately inform users what it does with their data, which runs counter to GDPR data access rights.
Nebraska is suing Change Healthcare over security failings that led to the medical data breach of over 100 million Americans. So in the complaint, the Attorney General claims that United Healthcare, owned Change Healthcare, failed to implement proper security measures, leading to what he describes as a, quote, historic data breach in terms of impact and magnitude. This comes after it was revealed in October that more than 100 million Americans had their sensitive medical data stolen during a February ransomware attack. The data included personal information such as address and phone number, health data including diagnoses, medication and treatment plans, and financial and banking data. Change continues to notify affected individuals about the breach, and the final number is expected to be higher than 100 million. The Attorney General said in his complaint that Change Healthcare's, quote, failures to implement basic security protections, unquote, exacerbated the extent of the cyber attack, which was attributed to the Russian-speaking Alpha ransomware gang. Alpha. I think it's Alpha. The complaint alleges that the health tech giant had poorly segmented IT systems that allowed the attackers to travel freely between servers, and that Change had failed to implement multi-factor authentication on its systems, which meant they could be accessed with just a username and password. The complaint also reveals some previously unreported information about the incident, including new details showing that the attackers gained access to Change's network using the username and password of a, quote, low-level customer support employee. With access to this basic user-level account, which did not have administrator access, the Attorney General continues to allege that the attackers were able to break into the server that hosted the medication management system, and from there, they created a privileged account with administrator capabilities, including the ability to access and delete files.
Get ready for a big one here, and Congress again fails to limit scope of spy powers in its new defense bill. So the U.S. Senate passed this, and it's the National Defense Authorization Act on Wednesday, after leaders earlier this month stripped the bill of provisions designed to safeguard against excessive government surveillance. The must-pass legislation now heads to President Biden for his expected signature. The Senate's 85-14 vote cements a major expansion of a controversial U.S. surveillance program. It's Section 702 of FISA, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Biden's signature will ensure that the Trump admin opens with the newfound power to force a vast range of companies to help U.S. spies wiretap calls between Americans and foreigners abroad. Just going to pause it there. I think that's a really good place to just touch on. I think it's the concept of turnkey politics is how Snowden refers to it. Pretty much the technologies that you are comfortable with one party having, you also have to be comfortable with whatever person you don't like in politics having as well. And so it's really interesting to see, I guess, the kind of things that people might be okay with one party but not another. But we always have to be thinking about how these technologies apply regardless of party and political preference. So the first change to this was because they said the language was too vague in the original form of this. The vague text was introduced into the law by Congress in April, and the Democrats in the Senate promising to correct the issue later this year. Those efforts proved to be very vain, and legal experts began issuing warnings last winter over their efforts to expand FISA to cover a vast range of new businesses not originally subject to these wiretap directives. So all it's doing is expanding it. So they changed the definition of what the government considers an electronic communication service provider, a term applied to companies that can be compelled to install wiretaps. So this used to mean just like AT&T and Google, people who actually provided service. But because they redefined the term, the limits of the government's wiretap powers are super unclear now. It's assumed that the changes were intended to help the NSA target communications stored on servers at US data centers. Another point I'm going to pause on. This is a longer story. We don't normally pause through the story. Important that typically data stored on servers that are sensitive that can be wiretapped is probably a service that we'd caution you away from in the first place. This is why we like zero knowledge providers, things like Signal, things that don't store your data in a way that can easily be wiretapped. So this is going to be just a good thing to keep in mind. Moving on from there, this was approved in June by Warner's committee aimed to clarify the scope, but was excised from the text of the NDAA earlier this month. So, sus, as I would call it. Wiretap orders issued under that 702 program permit the government to secretly eavesdrop on the calls and messages of foreigners who generally lack any right to privacy under U.S. law. The wiretaps, however, also routinely capture Americans in private conversation, despite constitutional limits that typically forbid such surveillance without a judge's consent. And I feel comfortable saying that it's been proven probably at least dozens of times now that despite all we hear about Americans not being allowed to be spied on, they very much are constantly. Now, calls, texts, and emails collected under the program may be stored by the government for up to 5 years and will be accessed in some cases by the FBI, so there's also sharing with other agencies. The Bureau maintains its own Section 702 database, which is regularly used to develop leads in cases unrelated to why the wiretaps were originally collected. And this exists to exclusively further the government's counterintelligence goals. So now let me get into the summary of this. So while the 702 program exists to exclusively further the government's counterintelligence goals, surveillance experts say its scope likely extends far beyond terrorism and cyber threats, encompassing activities described as falling under the broad scope of U.S. foreign affairs. Foreign journalists, government officials, and citizens of friendly nations never accused of a crime are just as likely to be deemed legitimate targets as foreign criminals and members of known terrorist organizations. And this is an issue that we talk about constantly, which is everybody gets sucked up into this. It's really easy to blame it on one demographic and say we're only going to track or do data with certain people, but at the end of the day, most people are caught up into it. So really not great story, and is one more example of privacy laws going backwards.
All right, that'll take us into free and open source news. Our first story is sad news. Unfortunately, the Divest OS project has ended. So for those of you who don't know, Divest OS was a hardened Android ROM. The only reason I never tried it is because apparently it doesn't have any Google services. So it doesn't use microG like Calyx does. And you can install microG, but it doesn't give it elevated permissions. December marks 10 years of Divest OS. I believe the projects were highly successful in their goals. However, this month will mark the end. Divest and its apps will not receive any further updates. Hypatia and Carry-On will no longer receive database updates. The non-mobile projects such as Brace, DWRT, Real Ucode, and DNS block lists will continue to be maintained. Most of our forum threads will be closed, and the XMPP chat rooms will also be turned off. Donations will no longer be accepted, and all recurring donations will be canceled. Thank you to all the users, contributors, and donors for this time. That's really all we know. As far as I know, I have not seen any forum posts explaining why. I really did want to like get hands on it and play around with it one of these days, and I just never really had the time because I never really had a spare compatible device. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just end by saying like I hope Tavi's okay. I hope whatever he goes on to next is fulfilling, and thanks for all you did. And I hope somebody will pick up at least some of the things they can, like Hypatia and Carry-On. I think those were really cool apps, and hopefully somebody will pick those up and continue to maintain them.
Let's Encrypt announces new certificate every 6-day offering. So their offering won't fundamentally change next year, but we are going to introduce a new one that's a big shift from anything they've done before. Pretty much they're releasing these short-lived certificates with a lifetime of 6 days, and it's a big upgrade for the security of the TLS ecosystem because it minimizes exposure time during a key compromise event. So because they've encouraged automation over the past decade, if any of you have ever set up Let's Encrypt, you'll know what that looks like. You like type a single command and you're now good to go. And you never really have to worry about it again if you set it up correctly. Most of those subscribers won't have to do anything for this because it's all automated. So on the other hand, they're going to think about the possibility that they'll need to issue 20 times as many certificates as they do now. It's not inconceivable that at some point in the next decade, they may need to be prepared to issue 100 million certificates per day, which is insane. So really cool project.
And that'll take us into Misfits, where we just have one quick story. The Not Lockbit ransomware targets Apple users with advanced file locking and data exfiltration. So this is a recently discovered malware called macOS.NotLockbit, and it suggests a shift in the landscape as this newly identified malware, named after the notorious Lockbit variant, could mark the beginning of more serious ransomware campaigns against Mac users. This was discovered by researchers at Trend Micro, later analyzed by Sentinel Labs, and it shows credible file locking and data exfiltration capabilities. The general perception has been that macOS is better protected against these kind of threats, partially due to Apple's built-in security features, such as transparency, consent, and control, or TCC protections. However, the emergence of macOS.NotLockbit signals that hackers are actively developing more sophisticated methods for targeting Apple devices. It functions similarly to other ransomware, but it specifically targets Mac. Thankfully, Apple's TCC protections remain a hard nut for macOS. These safeguards require user consent before granting access to sensitive directories or allowing control over processes like system events. While this creates a hurdle, bypassing TCC protections is not insurmountable, and experts expect that future iterations may develop ways to circumvent these alerts. Researchers have not yet identified a specific distribution method, and there are no known victims at present. However, the rapid evolution demonstrated by increasing size and sophistication of each new sample indicates that the attackers are actively working on improving it. Sentinel Labs identified multiple versions, suggesting that it is still in active development. In one of the most recent versions, it requires macOS Sonoma, indicating that the malware developers are targeting some of the latest macOS versions. It also showed attempts at obfuscating code, suggesting that the attackers are testing various techniques to evade detection by antivirus software. I mean, that's about it. I don't really have any thoughts on that. Just remember, nothing is unhackable. Always practice your basic, be minimal with your devices. Be careful what you click. Be careful what you download. All that fun stuff. And those were our stories for the past couple of weeks. Many people are not wiping their devices before they get rid of them, and that's concerning. Don't be one of those people. Come on, especially even if you're throwing it away, just take a few seconds, be on the cautionary side. Chrome is about to put user tracking into the express lane with device fingerprinting on multiple devices. And Serbia not only tried to unlock a journalist's phone with Cellebrite, but also tried to plant malware on it. So that's a disturbing escalation and much more. As always, stay subscribed, and we will let you know if we have updates to any of these stories. A friendly reminder that our sponsor this week, for the last couple weeks, has been easy opt-outs. If you are looking to wipe some of your data off the internet, they are a really good option. They are only $20 a year, so it's pretty affordable. Consumer Reports has confirmed that they are pretty effective. Almost as good as doing it yourself. They do not submit a removal request unless your data is found, so they are not just spraying your data all over the internet. They are always trying to add new sites. They have a low overhead. They don't use any third-party employees or contractors, so they're not sharing information with a bunch of people. They don't spend their money on big advertising campaigns. They don't use any analytics on their website. Cancellation is easy if you are not satisfied with the product. They do offer refunds. And if you are a business owner looking to offer a perk for your employees, they offer business plans. And I think I said this before, but just in case I cut it or something, I can personally attest they have great customer service. I've reached out to them, and for the record, I don't know if I want to say this. I put my real name on there. Like, I did not reach out to them as Nate. I've been using them for a while, and I've contacted them with questions or like, can you add this? I made this mistake, something. And they've always been very responsive and great customer service. So yeah, highly recommend. And again, thank you to them for supporting us. And once again, if you are looking to at least get some of the low-hanging fruit in your data removal quest, you can do a lot worse than them. They're a pretty great service that we believe in. That is all for this episode. Thank you guys for listening to Surveillance Report. Links to all of the stories can be found in the show notes. If you have a story that you think we should cover, send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. The last thing we want to ask of you, please share the podcast around. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss an episode. Give us a rating if you're on a platform where that's an option. Those really do help. We are trying to reach as many people as possible with a message of privacy, and every little bit helps us do that. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you again next week.